The criticism that cures the heart, taken from the Aletheon, Volume 1, page 137. The divine avataric self-revelation of his divine presence, Avatar Adida Samraj. In this late time or dark epoch, religions are fundamentally being used by humanity in a narcissistic manner. A collective narcissism is being expressed and reflected through people's participation in religion. People think religion is about themselves, whereas right religious practice is supposed to be about the divine. The word religion has traditionally been interpreted to mean to connect again, to rejoin, to re-establish unity with the ultimate reality, the divine condition. Thus, right religious practice is about being connected to the divine. Right religious practice is not about the me of you. Right religious practice is not about the ego, I. Right religious practice is not about the me person who participates in religious observances. Rather, right religious practice is about the divine, with which any individual is reassociating or reuniting. Right religious practice is ultimately about discovering oneness with the divine condition, to be always already the case. That is right religious practice. In this late time or dark epoch, religion has been reduced to being nothing but a reflection of humankind. The talkers of religion are constantly making pronouncements about matters of a social and obsessively sexual and political nature. Matters that are essentially about humankind rather than about the divine, and of a gross nature rather than of a spiritual, transcendental and divine nature. In the midst of all of that, each person's religious cult becomes his or her identity, and the cults even wage war on one another through association with nation states that give them power and supply weaponry. Thus, in this late time or dark epoch, religion is being used narcissistically, as if religion were about the human ego instead of being about the divine condition of reality itself. To realize the divine condition of reality itself, to reunite with that, to discover oneness with that, requires the transcending of the human ego. Moreover, religion is being collectively used in a divisive manner, generating confrontation and more illusion. Right religious practice is not about generating illusions, but conventional religion is, in its fundamentals of belief and of seeking, a common means that is everywhere used to support and propagate and serve illusions. Conventional religion is about Santa Claus deities, and conventional religion is everywhere exploited to provide costumes and theatre for mummers. When people's participation in religion is narcissistic, their religion is merely a reflection of themselves, and in that case, people do not find the divine. Thus, all over the earth, right religious practice is being lost, and religion is being misused for narcissistic purposes. That is not right practice. That is not right religious practice. That is false religious practice. Exoteric religion is not enough. The true practitioner of exoteric religion must and will grow up, and thus and thereby enter into the domain of esotericism. Esotericism is about finding or realizing that to which exoteric religion is merely pointing. Remarkably, the first 6 stages of life are entirely about human beings. Thus, it can be said that a great tradition of humankind is, as a whole, narcissistic. That straight-on assessment of the great tradition is fundamental to what I have revealed. The first 6 stages of life represent the totality of human endeavors previous to my divine avataric self-revelation work. The first 6 stages of life are all about the ego, the mirrored or objectified persona, the separate I looking for that which is reality itself, or that which is, by its very nature, divine. But all these endeavors simply make use of the various structured levels of the human mechanism. This is true even of the esotericism of the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th stages of life. That esotericism simply plays upon the gross, subtle, and causal, or total psychophysical structure of the human entity, which is, at root, the ego. Conventional religion and conventional esotericism only point toward truth. The perfect realization of truth itself transcends both conventional religion and conventional esotericism, and thus perfectly transcends the ego I. Therefore, right religious practice directly relates to the divine. All human matters can be readily resolved when people are rightly reassociated with reality itself, or that which is divine. When people are not thus reassociated, religion is simply another device that human beings use to shore up the ego, to give it a theatre in which to play, and thus and therein to generate forms of pseudo-identity and all the possible illusions associated with belonging to a collective pseudo-identity. To do so is to utterly misuse religion, because right religious practice is not about the human self or the ego I. Right religious practice is about that which transcends the human self or the ego I. Therefore, if religion has anything to say about human behavior, it is entirely in the context of the ego transcending non-difference from the ultimate divine condition that is reality itself. Religions need to rediscover and become redirected toward that to which they are pointing. Ultimately, what right religious or esoteric practice points to is not within the context of the human body-mind complex. In other words, what right religious or esoteric practice points to is not at all in the realm of the first 6 stages of life. What right religious or esoteric practice points to is beyond all of that. Of course, when that is discovered or relocated, that discovery or relocating obviously has an immense impact on human behavior. In fact, that discovery or relocating generates the course of right life altogether. COURSE, course. However, even the generating of right life is a result or a reflection of the realization of truth itself. In and of itself, right life is not truth itself. Truth itself is reality itself, and reality with a capital R itself is the only God there is. All the mere God ideas are reflections of the human entity, the human ego, the body-mind self. Therefore, with reference to reality itself, or to that which is divine, all religions are inherently limited and even in and of themselves false, and therefore all religions can be grossly misused. Because conventional religions do not reach beyond themselves to that which is beyond, that which is divine, every separate religious tradition becomes a something in and of itself, and religion is reduced to what is gross and merely of a political and social nature, obsessed with the self-righteousness of correct social and sexual behavior, and darkened by social xenophobia, sexual paranoia, and every kind of prejudice based on purity laws and complex loveless taboos. All of that is entirely narcissistic. Therefore, conventional and self-deluded participation in religion has all the negative results of narcissistic behavior or ego-based separative behavior altogether. Religion is not the only dimension of human life that is being misused. All aspects of human possibility are being misused in exactly the same manner. It is simply that religion is one of the key dimensions of human life in which it can be clearly seen how the human entity works, individually and collectively, and why egoity must be transcended. Therefore, mere religion, or any and all religion in and of itself, must be transcended. Conventional religion in and of itself is not the point, and much of conventional religion has now lost its legitimacy. The real esoteric process must be established in present time with reference to reality itself. Reality itself is divine. Reality itself is all the God there is. Only reality itself is the true esoteric process. Conventional religion functions in the context of the cult of narcissistic mind, entirely absorbed in the mere ideas of humanity's preoccupation with itself. As I have said, you are suffering because you have too much of one another and not enough of me. That is a criticism of the misuse of the opportunity to engage the real esoteric process, and a criticism of the misuse of life altogether. Conventional religion fails to turn people to the realization of that to which it points, and therefore conventional religion is inherently false. That is a radical message, but it is the fundamental message that is relevant to the issues of religion in present time. The ecumenical message is not it. Going beyond religion to that to which religion points is essential. No form of conventional religion is it, and indeed, conventional religion never was it. However, the human misuse of religious possibility is purposed to make religion seem to be it, and even in the centuries since the Western Renaissance, to make humanity in and of itself seem to be it. In truth and in reality, humanity is not it. In truth and in reality, only real a causal God is it. Only that which is God, and which is reality itself, is it. Real a causal God is not a myth. Real a causal God is not merely an idea. The existence of real a causal God cannot be disproven, and paradoxically, the existence of real a causal God cannot even be proven. Rather, the existence of real a causal God is self-evident or self-affirming and self-authenticating, because reality itself is inherently the case, inherently true, and inherently divine. Rightly used, exoteric religion is something like a picture book for leading people to mature human understanding. However, if exoteric religion is not used in that manner, it becomes a something in and of itself. In that case, religion becomes false cultism in one form or another, shoring up its own imagery and reinforcing its authority and control over people within the domain of institutionalized lies. In the form of such ego-based cultism, religion does terrible harm to everyone. The global human situation has now become a terrible collective calamity, a global tragedy with ego-based religion at its root. And such ego-based religion is utterly false. Right religious practice is simply a call to the divine condition that is reality itself. That is what right religious practice is about. That is what right religious practice is for. And that is the only truth in right religious practice. Indeed, the divine condition that is reality itself is the only truth in life altogether. Everything else is mummery. Everything else is false. The divine is not false. However, human beings are, by tendency, false, and therefore they must be served to be rightened. If the word religion is to be used at all, that process of rightening is the purpose of true right religious practice. Right religious practice turns people from separate self or egoity, or the habit of Narcissus and the life of mere ideas, to reality itself, through a process of the real transcending of egoity and comprehensive rightening of life. If religion does not do that, then it is merely part of the unspeakable self-deludedness of humankind, with its terrible present time and potential results. In this sense, I am not in the slightest religious. I do not believe anything. The prior renunciation or intrinsic transcending of all mere belief is the basis on which I have always lived, and the basis on which I have done all of my divine avataric work. There are no mere ideas that must, or even should, be accepted absolutely. Indeed, there are no mere ideas that are acceptable as truth. Therefore, nobody on truth has the right or calling to absolutely affirm the verity of anything for which they do not have absolute evidence. And there is not anything that is truth or really absolute except that which is self-evident as reality with a capital R itself. Look at all the affirming of religious doctrine in human society, always affirming mere ideas and imperfect evidence, and even human lies and inventions to be absolute truth. Where is the evidence that justifies making such absolute affirmations? I am not speaking of any religion in particular. All religions are filled with such absolute affirmations, and such absolute affirmations are complete nonsense. People do not make these affirmations because they actually know them to be truth, or even because they have proven them to be, in the conventional sense, true. Nor is it the case that these affirmations are referring to self-evident reality itself. Truth itself cannot be proven. Truth itself is not in doubt. Therefore, neither can truth itself be disproven. Reality itself cannot be disproven, nor can reality itself be proven. Reality itself is intrinsically and tacitly self-evident. People constantly make grandiose affirmations about religion, but in doing so, they are merely playing power games and mumming on one another. They make absurd affirmations that something is absolutely so, and they commit their entire lives to it, but it is absolute nonsense. They are not certain with the clarity born of real testing and proving that what they affirm is true. And if you are not absolutely certain that something is true, absolute affirmation of it is not appropriate. The same is true for any other kind of presumed knowledge, not only religious beliefs. If you are not absolutely certain of anything, it should not be affirmed absolutely. It may be interesting, it may be worthy of further consideration, but if you are not absolutely certain of it, you should not affirm it absolutely. In truth, the only thing that can be affirmed absolutely is reality itself, which is truth itself. No mere point of information can be absolutely affirmed. Therefore, any mere point of information is simply a subject of further consideration or discussion, and should only be tentatively affirmed as something that may be the case, as something that seems to be the case based on some level of evidence. Making absolute affirmations is not a proper disposition for any exercise engaged from a scientific perspective. However, scientists frequently make absolute affirmations as if they have some sort of absolute knowledge, whereby they are entitled to absolutely affirm that such and such is or is not the case. To indulge in absolute affirmations, including the affirmation of scientific materialist philosophy, is a gross misuse of the authority of science. Science is not in a position to make absolute affirmations. True science is the method of inquiry without prejudice, and that method of inquiry enables science only to make propositions that are tentatively affirmable, and that must necessarily be tested by all yet future evidence. In the realm of science, further investigation is always required. The basis of all right and true science is this: nothing absolute can be known or otherwise said about conditionally arising phenomena. Religion as an objective phenomenon is a collection of ideas and doctrines that cannot and should not be absolutely affirmed. Therefore, what is the point of getting absolutely affirmative about religious doctrines, myths, and reports? Truth itself is the only absolute, and reality itself is only self-evident. Much can and must be made of truth itself, or reality itself, but there is no point in making much of any mere ideas or any merely conditional appearances, because everything that appears conditionally is itself tentative and non-absolute. Adidam is not what is conventionally called a religion. Adidam is a way. Adidam is not based on absurd affirmations or beliefs. Rather, Adidam is about reality itself, which is self-evident, and therefore not as something in the realm of or category of things that are either provable or disapprovable. Adidam is a reality way with reality's own means provided, in which you are called to really participate, such that you really and intrinsically realize the self-nature, self-condition, and self-state of reality itself. I have much to say of a critical nature relative to egoity, as it manifests both individually and collectively, and relative to all the stuff of humanity and its mere ideas. Nevertheless, my criticism is spoken in a positive disposition. There is no harm intended in my criticism. My criticism is a revelation of that which is divine. Therefore, my criticism cures the heart and cures the life, but by the means of truth itself, or reality itself, and not by all of the means concocted by ego-bound humanity in its world mummery of suffering and seeking. Da, da, da.